Just in closing, I'm sure you read like I do the forecast, right? Gartner's numbers look really optimistic. Canalys has some really good optimistic stuff. All the major MSP platform, enabler technology companies have their own reports. All of them look really solid. I've been tracking the market for longer than I can remember. This seems like a really solid year for MSPs. Again, are we missing something? What's your view of the upcoming year as you look at it?
I would say going into the elections last year, there was a lot of uncertainty in the space. There weren't as many buying signals from prospects and customers. I mean, we all grew really well, but there was definitely some trepidation in the market. I think post the election, that's changed pretty significantly.
Okay. Glenn, welcome to the MSP Zone. Thank you very much for being here today. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me.
I I always love talking to MSP operators and owners because my view, I don't necessarily hear a lot of people talking about it this way, but I definitely view companies like Integris as being on the front lines of today's cyber war, right? I mean, it's maybe a little bit overly dramatic to call it a cyber war, but in many ways, I think it is, right? If it's not a overtly stated, act of Congress type of war, it certainly feels like a battlefield. You guys do amazing work, and you do amazing work for a lot of um, kind of vertical specialized customers. For those who may not be familiar with the Integris story, could you just maybe give us a little bit of background of what you guys have been up to for the past couple of years?
Yeah. So again, appreciate you having me on, and look forward to our conversation. But yes, Integris is a platform national premium IT managed service provider. We offer full service experience to our customers, including managed IT services, as you were talking about, cybersecurity services, lots of consulting services, cloud services, and many, many other services. We focus on the upper end of the SMB sector that really appreciates the premium and professional services that a company like ours can bring to bear. You mentioned we're vertically focused, and we're mostly in regulatory and regulated adjacent industries. We are one of our main verticals is our community banking verticals. We also have a legal vertical practice that we manage too. We are building out our CMMC regulated manufacturing vertical as well. We're opportunistic on other regulated industries like healthcare and others. So we also have a horizontal practice. A lot of our SMB customers are industry focused. So you might have a need for understanding a little bit of that Rosetta Stone, but not quite yet to the level of needing practice resources expertise. So we do have a horizontal practice as well, but our focus is providing our technology stack in a very verticalized way.
Not to say that what you do is easy, because I know it's not easy at all. You
Yeah,
may
yeah, yeah.
make it look like it's easy, but it's been a fairly, a fairly true, statement, a maxim, if you will, that, the more vertical focused you are as an MSP, generally you tend to be more resistant, right, to down, fluctuations in the market, the economy. You certainly have some benefits, I think, in terms of easier time with client acquisition. Has that been your case with Integris?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as I said, we're driven by regulatory compliance. And while that isn't easy, it does allow you to build a Rosetta Stone around what really is the tip of the spear for a regulated and a vertical focused organization, which is really data. It also ties into where we think the MSP industry is moving in the future. The industry has been very much infrastructure focused, center of the universe being tied to the device or the user. And really, I think as you move forward and you start talking about cybersecurity, and you talk about the cloud, and you talk about securing data that's no longer on-prem, data needs to become the center of that universe. And so how it's protected from a security perspective, both defensive and offensive, is important. Where it sits in the cloud, whether it's public or private or hybrid, and then diving deeper into how it's accessed. This is where you start getting into that Rosetta Stone of a particular vertical, the vertical applications, how you access that data, how do you normalize that data, how do you organize that data, and then you can get into some of the things you were leading up to at the beginning, which is talking about automation and talking about AI, how you leverage that data and access that data and present that data to your customers and your customers' customers becomes a lot more interesting. you still you still have these spider webs off of the that are still data or user and device focused. But while you were sleeping services and service desks, those are going to become more commoditized and much more table stakes moving forward. And so, we really believe that if you take that entire digital state and you focus on creating the Rosetta Stone in that digital state for each vertical customer, then you can really dive deeper and wider than just the traditional infrastructure services and support SMB customers are usually receiving from an MSP. And I think that's really what's important. There's going to be more regulatory compliance that's needed with some of these verticals. And having an MSP that's well versed in that digital estate and that dataverse is going to be critical. The horizontal services are going to become more and more commoditized as well. And there's going to be less of a reason to go to a generalist MSP because more and more of the data that you're managing has to be protected in a very different way.
Yeah, it's a good point, Glenn. Yeah, so I have to ask this question because it has been a legacy question for a certain segment of the market, and I suspect I already know the answer, but have you been troubled by any of these, kind of wannabe MSP pretenders that have come up over the last 5+ years that are in the cyber consultancy, business model where I don't view them as necessarily anything close to a managed services proactive model, but nevertheless they tend to try to swim in that lane. Have you had any experience or run-ins with these types of companies in the past?
Yeah, sure. And I think that I think that when you have a niche like in cybersecurity and that's all you really provide, then there's a lot of things in that environment that you can't necessarily that you don't own, number one, and don't have responsibility for, and therefore can't really secure and manage it correctly. And so a true MSP in a digital state sort of way is going to be responsible for all those points and nooks and crannies that an SMB customer is going to be experiencing. And so I think that you have to have a more well-rounded viewpoint as it relates to the infrastructure, as it relates to certainly security, as it relates to the cloud, as it relates to different elements of security, such as cybersecurity, as physical security. And there's a lot of elements related to it that I think only a true managed service provider that is focused in a particular vertical can truly provide.
Yeah. No, it's good. Good answer. I suspected as much. I want to ask one final question about vertical specialization. I'm keenly aware of your financial services practice. We've been certifying you guys for many years. Do you think that does it get easier as you master one vertical market to then expand into something completely different, but still a vertical market? Are there any commonalities in your approach to a vertical market?
I think that when you build out a vertical practice, it's not just about the go to market sales motions. It's also building the factory of support and the factory of CX around those customers once you bring them on board that you have to tailor towards that vertical market. And so building that Rosetta Stone that I keep talking about where you're learning the language of that particular vertical is a muscle and something that you can learn and then much more easily replicate in other verticals, especially if they're somewhat adjacent to the vertical that you're in. And so the more regulatory compliance verticals that we move into, they're similar enough that the motions of how do you build the factory from sales all the way to delivery is very similar. The language changes a little bit because what's relevant to a community bank isn't necessarily relevant to a regulated manufacturing environment completely, but there are elements that are similar. And so our teams are very well versed in building out those pods of structures to support those customers. I think it's really the only way that you can differentiate yourself from those that you call them pretenders, but those that will say they have vertical practices. But in reality, what they have is a lot of industry customers. They might have lots of community banks in their customer pool, but they haven't built that specific Rosetta Stone and really focus on the digital side, the data side of that customer environment to really build out and round out a true vertical practice. And so, yes, I think you can certainly replicate them. It's just a matter of getting it done right the first time, understanding the different components that go into building a practice, and then making sure that you have the Lego blocks that you can easily transfer to the other verticals. It'd be one thing going from community banks to say nonprofit, different world, not exactly regulatory compliant, although they might have some adjacent requirements. But we tend to try to stay within what we know, and regulatory compliance is a big part of us determining sort of the verticals we want to be in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Shifting maybe a little bit to mergers and acquisitions. You'd mentioned your national MSP platform play. I'm personally, privy to a number of the acquisitions that you guys have made. You've acquired. I don't have the final tally, but I've certainly witnessed a handful of certified MSP Alliance members that you guys have acquired. So really, really good, well-performing MSPs. How does Integris approach acquisition? Because well, I don't want to spoil the answer, but I think I know the answer, but I want to hear your approach because I think it's probably different than how some other platform plays might be approaching it. What's your approach?
Yeah, so we're very specific about who we are. I think that's one of the things that makes us a little different from a lot of MSPs is that there is an Integris way, and there's a standard for which we really believe that how we do things and what we do, what it means to our employees and our customers and our shareholders. We're very deliberate on that vision creation. And we're also very deliberate around the ICP of the type of customer we want to work with, and we're diligent in making sure that we bring on those customers that we know we can bring that premium service to. So a lot of it comes from knowing who we are and what we want to be. We have an end in mind. We have a SIM for 2029. We know how we might want to exit into the marketplace again when our turn comes around. And so knowing that, I think, is half the battle. From that, that definitely shapes our go-to-market strategy in terms of how we bring on new organic customers. But it also feeds the inorganic side. And so when you think about acquisitions, because we have that identity fairly mapped out, we know how we want to build the factories around the verticals that we want to create. It makes it really easy for us to go out and look at and find those companies that have similar DNA to us. And so, there's a lot of MSPs out there that are everything to everyone. And that's a very, very wide and schizophrenic sort of ICP. You can't necessarily, with the same factory, support an SMB customer the same way you would a mid-market or enterprise customers, and yet lots try. Those wouldn't be great fits for us. What we're really looking for are people that are committed to the upper end of the SMB, that have industry or vertical practice support that we know we could bring on board and upskill and upscale those services and teams and help us grow into this business that we know we're focused on. The SMB market is woefully underserved, often overlooked, and I would still argue is more sophisticated than most mid-market and larger organizations because of their ability to change. They're baby steps away from emerging technology, and they're much more sophisticated than they've ever been before. And that sophistication requires a more sophisticated response. And that's going to come from MSPs that have high operational maturity and are looking for customers with that same operational maturity level. And so that really focuses us in on the type of acquisitions that we look for, especially when we're looking in the horizontal space. Now, there are vertical players out there that we rank and we decide, are they, where do they land on the ranking of a great MSP in a particular vertical? And we're always talking to those and trying to bring those on board, especially in the areas that we're really good at and want to continue to grow our vertical practices. But we're also looking at strategic practices, looking at companies that do data services and have skill sets that we're looking to acquire to be able to utilize in our vertical practices more effectively. It's not just about buying revenue and buying EBITDA. It's not just a shareholder exercise. And, we could do that all day long. And there are lots of them that are out there doing that. But that doesn't build a great company. And that doesn't really build one that has an identity and can create an end in mind that we're all sort of marching towards. And if we really do believe in this digital state that we're building, MSP, that's going to become that, this maybe new category of MSP, DMSP, whatever you want to call it, there are opportunities for us to do it the right way. And that's going to come from not making mistakes on the acquisition side.
I'd be curious. I know you have investors, right? So I assume I've talked to my fair share of investors over the years interested in the MSP landscape. And, a lot of them are just by the revenue, right? A point that you
Yeah.
just made earlier. Why do you think that is such a prevalent? Because I think it's a prevalent. I think your model is less prevalent, not bad. All right. I'm not saying bad. I think yours is a very solid approach for growth. Why is I don't know how you call it, bulking up or growth for revenue's sake? Why is that such a popular theme in MSP?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you mentioned partners. Who you partner with from an investment perspective is really, really critical. I think a lot of it comes down to just lack of understanding of the space. And for those that do go after it just from a perspective of bulking up, as you were describing, I think it's a lack of understanding of the space, and that there are good ways and bad ways of building an MSP. Size is certainly going to be interesting because with size, you can manage skill and scale more effectively. With size, you're able to bring resources to bear more effectively to the problem or to the issue, to the project, and you're able to build out factories of support and really take the hats off the engineers and just leave them on with one hat on and let them focus on subject matter expertise in a way that's really meaningful for our customer base. And so I think a lot of it is just lack of understanding and knowledge of the space, and that there's wrong ways to build it. Fortunately for us, as we just recapped in December of 2024. And we went through a long, exhaustive search for the right partner. Rashad and I probably talked to 20, 30 private equity firms. And there were a lot of really good ones out there with they have the right ideas. There are ones that really understand how to build this the right way. And there certainly are ones that, as you said, are just, bulking up. Uh, but we spent the time to find the right partner, and in Omers, who's our new partner from Canada, a Canadian pension fund, they really are aligned to sort of how we think this market's going to be built up, and they're really real aligned with how to do it in a vertical way. They're very much aligned with doing it in a premium way, and we're really going to hold each other accountable to making sure that we stick very much to our plan, to our ICP, and growing it the proper way. I don't know why other private equity firms don't always understand the space as well as they could or should, but I think that's probably what it is, not just understanding it as well as they should.
Well, certainly, if they took a page from the Integris playbook, I mean, they would see a a solid organic growth, but also inorganic growth and expansion through strategic, well positioned. You had some good adjectives for how you go about your selection process, but you pick very carefully. And then when you do strike, you get at really high performing MSPs who get you into vertical markets that you care about. I mean that's my outsider looking in view.
Yeah, you can't, there's no way you can, there's no substitute for hard work in your due diligence. I'm very proud to say that in all the acquisitions we've done, any IOI we've ever presented, we've never had to retrade that IOI. And that's because we don't go into an IOI just wanting to learn more or start the process there. We're very deliberate about the MSPs that, we'd love to to be part of our platform, ones that we know that can Lego block into not only our culture, but also into that end in mind we were talking about where we really feel this industry is going, and the type of MSP we're trying to build is digital MSP. And so we're very focused on and learning about these MSPs well before we even start conversations with them. We're fortunate to be a part of a very important peer group, which is called Evolve. And Evolve started as HTG, which was then sold to ConnectWise, is now IT Nations and Evolve. And so we get to meet and spend time with a lot of these acquisitions in ways that we're able to rip off and support each other in a very professional way. We're able to share ideas and kind of build the MSP together and learn from each other. So we get a lot of insight into the types of MSPs that are out there through Evolve and through a lot of other industries and associations that we're a part of as well. That goes a long way. That investment in time, that investment of money into pre-IOI due diligence with a lot of these organizations is really important to us. And it allows us to make sure that we're bringing the right ones that fit into what we're doing and where we're going. It's really easy to make mistakes with acquisitions if you don't do it right. You've probably heard a lot of your own horror stories around acquisitions that happen and then they lose half of the customer base, or they lose a lot of the employee base. And most of the time that's because there just wasn't a real clear plan to how to integrate them. Leaving an acquisition off alone on its own without integrating for too long of a period of time, breaks that MSP, and it breaks the acquisition, and it breaks that investment that you made. So there's lots of hygiene and important habits that go into building out an acquisition strategy that you have to be very, very disciplined around.
Shifting a little bit to AI and automation, you know, we've had a legacy problem in the MSP profession for over a decade, probably a decade and a half, around scarcity of human resources, right? And availability or accessibility, right? For wage inflation and other reasons throughout the years. The advent of automation, but specifically artificial intelligence fueling that, I can't help but sense a promise, right? That the MSP market might actually be able to hyperscale for once in a way that doesn't completely rely on bulking up with human talent, which is not to say that humans won't be forever embedded in managed services.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about how Integris is approaching AI automation and your attempt to solidify your existing nationwide presence?
Yeah. So a couple things. One is I would say that there are very few MSP platforms out there. We're one of them, and we certainly have aggressive and ambitious goals to be the biggest one out there. But more importantly, we want to be the quality MSP of size and platform. The cool thing about having a platform is a little I touched on a little bit earlier is about being able to utilize the skill and scale that comes with that. We have over 600 people at Integris today, and before this year is out, my guess is we'll be closer to 900 people. Some acquisitions that we want to do, but I would say that our responsibility now isn't necessarily to hire a person every time you bring in $1 of revenue, and it's really critical that you figure out how to maximize efficiency but also quality at the same time as you're maximizing efficiency to the benefit of the customer. And yes, you're right. That does not mean we're not going to need people. In fact, we're going to need lots of great people in our MSP as we grow the business. But more importantly, I want those people focused on things that are interesting to them. I don't necessarily need someone out there installing workstations and servers anymore. Level 1, level 2 resourcing on the help desk perspective can subside a little as you start shifting work left all the way to automation and perhaps self-service and a variety of other things utilizing AI and machine learning. So there's lots of ways that you can bring these tools into play to help an MSP moving forward, both on the internal side and the external side. So we've coined a term called chore automation. And so what that means is that when we identify chores through our processes and everything that we do, whether it's an internal process or an internal exercise that has to get conducted, or it's something for our customers, identifying chores with our customers, we automate it. And so everything we can automate from a perspective that's low hanging fruit and that we can shift left all the way to automation really frees up our resources to do the things that they're really good at. More consulting, more in the security side, more in the virtualization side, more on the cloud side, more on the consulting side, where we're able to look and manage data and provide access to data. So all of those things that are tied to also creating that vertical Rosetta Stone are the things that we want to focus our people on. There's lots of coins in the seat cushion relative to inefficiencies in a business like ours. I don't necessarily think offshore, nearshore, outsourcing these resources to a cheaper resources that is the home run answer either. I think there's elements of that for while you were sleeping type services you can offshore, but anything touching a customer from an MSP perspective where intimacy is required, I don't think you can do that offshore or nearshore in the ways that some people are trying to do it. And I think you're seeing a lot of people scale that back because they've run into those challenges. So automation and ML are going to, more importantly than AI, I think, is going to be the thing that we want to integrate into our businesses really effectively. And if you can build out a data lake and where you can apply those things to it, that's when then AI becomes really interesting, because then you can apply whatever AI to that normalized data in a more effective way and that knowledge that you have in a more effective way. So we're big proponents of building out chore automation. We're big proponents around dealing out business process management with our customers and helping them identify those chores. And then also then how to organize that data in a way that more effectively allows them to use it with their customers. And then whatever AI is available at the time, yeah, there's lots of instances you can use it, whether it's a knowledge management, utilizing Watson to get to problems faster on your help desk side, or whether it's a machine learning where you're predicting churn within your customer base, or because of the markers that exist in the data, or whatever it might be. There's lots of applications that you can bring to bear, and we're certainly investigating all of those.
Yeah, no, you brought up a point that I think is going to be a topic of some interest just because over the last 25 years, the offshore providers have played such a vital role in staff augmentation for rank and file MSPs, particularly the level ones, like you said, Glenn. I can't help but think that that's going to go away. I don't know what they're going to do, those offshore providers, but I think you're spot on that those level one, level twos are going to need they're going to be freed up to do more exciting, more important things. I can't help but think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it allows us to train those people to do more. I think, unfortunately, for smaller MSPs, it's not going to go away as we continue to get better at the things we're talking about. Again, as a platform, that's one of the advantages. We have the resources, we have the R&D, we have the time, and we have the money to, and the partnerships with our private equity firms to invest in the things that we know are going to get us to the MSP of the future. Most small MSPs don't have that option. And so but they're going to have to compete from a price perspective. And in doing so, there's only so much margin you can give up, right? So a lot of them are going to continue to use offshore, nearshore resources for their level one, level two customer facing things. But there in itself will create this cyclical sort of event where you'll churn customers. And so everyone's going to have to get involved in sort of the management of data and a plan around the digital estate for their particular environments. And I think the ones that figure out how to shift the appropriate work left all the way to automation, I think are going to get ahead. I think the ones that recalibrate their teams to focus on the MSP work of the future, security and cloud and data and those types of things, are going to get ahead. And those that are able to build factories of support from go-to-market all the way to delivery that are specialized in particular verticals and that Rosetta Stone of that particular vertical are going to get ahead. And it's incumbent on us to have the right organic and inorganic strategies to be able to continue to grow that base as you build it. I think with AI, probably the most important thing we're going to have to worry about, I say worry about, but thing you have to account for is really going to be data privacy and making sure that the MSP of the future knows how to manage data effectively, from the data governance and compliance, whether it's, there's going to be lots of adherence to global industry specific regulations like HIPAA, CMMC, and in Europe, things like GDPR. There's data classification items you have to look at. There's privacy by design and how you provide access to those systems in their development. There's data minimization. You can collect a lot of data, and most of our customers have lots and lots and lots of data, but you should only really be collecting data that's limited to what's essential for that AI system to work. So there's lots of rules and things that you need to be worrying about as you build out these services of the future as well.
Yeah, no, good points. It's a perfect segue because I wanted to talk about and hear your thoughts about the customer and customer risk. I can't help but piece together, both through conversations with MSPs as well as through government policy people, mostly at the federal level, who have some preconceived ideas and opinions about MSPs. A lot of them are wrong, in my opinion, but they also have a sense that there is a lot of work to be done at all levels, but particularly SMB, where the customers there just are not quite ready to engage fully in this cyber fight. Meaning they're not looking at themselves, or, my opinion, my words, allowing their MSP more reign to get in there and advocate for change and defensive technologies and make changes to process. Do you think that that's true? And if you do encounter those types of customers, what's the Integris approach to getting them well defended, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So first, I think at the boiling of the ocean part of it, if we're going to boil the ocean of the SMB space, it's a huge ICP. It's a really massive TAM. And not all SMB customers are created equal, which is why I go back to what I said earlier, which is the MSP where you're trying to be one thing for all, even in the SMB space, is probably not a smart way to think about how you want to acquire customers. The right customer is going to be the customer that understands the value of IT, that is appropriately paranoid about how to manage IT in the most effective way to establish the appropriate guardrails and rules to protect them from all the different things that you are alluding to and mentioning, especially on the cybersecurity side. Finding that sector of the SMB space is very paranoid. They are actually letting us do those types of things in terms of supporting them and making recommendations and listening to those recommendations as they build out their stronghold. So I think that if you're going to be in the micro side of the SMB, yeah, you're going to see that all day long. You're going to have very difficult time supporting those customers. But in the space that we live in, which is the upper in the SMB, professional services, vertical focused, regulatory compliant driven verticals, those SMB customers are demanding that we're in there consulting and driving value around these types of discussions. It's really, really critical that you find the right ICP to be able to support. I would say the other part of it too is, MSPs really should have a standard in which they bring a customer on. So we have something called RITA, which is our responsible IT architecture. It's a dozen or so controls that we sit down with the right customer and we say, here are the things that have to be in place in order for us to work together as a customer and an MSP, right? As partners. I've always said good fences build good neighbors. To me, RITA is that fence that you build that says, if the end in mind for you is protection and avoiding risk as much as you possibly can and building the right IT systems for your teams and to help grow your business, then we have to have the right guardrails in place. And responsible IT architecture, or RITA, is our way of doing that. So a customer comes in agreeing to adhere to those standards, and we implement those almost immediately. If they're not willing to do that, then we don't bring them on as a customer. And it's not the right customer for us. There are a lot of MSPs that will take them on in whatever state that they're in. And, you throw caution to the wind at that point. So I think an MSP has to be very diligent about their version of RITA. They have to be very diligent about the ICP in which they're supporting the kind of customer that they want to be in, the type of vertical they want to be in. And then they have to have a point of view and they have to build out the roadmap for that customer and manage to it in a really effective way. And quality is going to be just as important as quantity, if not more so. So that's sort of Integris's view on it. I don't think the SMB space in general is the right way to look at it. I think you have to look at the pockets of SMB because there's so many different types of SMB customers out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really so you're basically self-selecting through your onboarding and sales process, a mature-minded customer who is willing to not give up or transfer is certainly not what I'm intending, but they're willing to say, okay, like we're going to go with Integris because you guys are going to guide us. We're going to pay you to teach us, to guide us. I think that there's a fair amount of the SMB market that that they're not talking to an MSP who would tell them that or help them guide them, or the customer themselves aren't mature enough. Are you ever, so first of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, if you get a non-mature minded customer, what do you do with them? Do you tell them come on to the Integris way, or do you say we don't want to work with you?
Yeah, that used to be a really big problem. I would say, I've been in this industry 27, 28 years. And for the vast majority of it, I'd say that has always been a big issue, which is getting sophisticated business owners at the SMB level to really understand why those things are so important. The cool thing is now their sons and daughters run those businesses for the most part now, and they're much more native to the IT side of things and understand the complexities that are involved in that. So many of the customers we bring on board now are born in the cloud. They never had an on-site server. They never had those blinking lights that they looked at in a little room somewhere in their office. And so most of them really are digital natives and understand the complexity and far more sophisticated than they've ever been before. So I'd say that problem is becoming less and less and less. It does help, as I said, that we focus on a particular subset of the SMB market where we're more likely to find people that understand that value better. But in the case that you find someone that needs some convincing, I think education is also a good thing. There's nothing wrong with educating prospects on why and painting the picture that we're painting here of why that should be important to them. And then being able to show them, especially if it's in a particular vertical. I've got lots of data within my own verticals. I have hundreds of customers within a vertical that they might be a part of where I can point to how these things change things for them. I can give them tons of references. I can walk them down the path of how their mean time to resolution, their resolve rates, all those things, their chances of having an attack, a cybersecurity attack, are lessened if you have the right things in place. I can walk them through our own data that shows our own customer merit that can help educate them on why those things are important. And if that point that's still not enough, then it's all okay to shake hands and say we're just not right partners for each other. And refer them to someone that might be better suited to take them on.
Yeah, well, that really, Glenn, is the juncture that we're trying to. I think we're at now, which is what other option is there other than to take the approach that you so clearly articulated. And my view, and I'm trying to persuade other people in government that there isn't. That there is no break fix alternative to this that's going to be safe. It's either you get with the program and figure out what the threats are and behave and adapt appropriately, or you wait until it's your turn, you get breached, you get attacked, and then you go through and become one of the.
And no one's immune to it either. It doesn't matter how well prepared you are, you're still at risk. There isn't a fail safe in any way, shape, or form. All you can really do is minimize the risk as much as you can. And there's safeguards and things that you can put in place. There's people you can partner with. There's companies you can partner with. There's MSPs you can go out there and find to support you. There's lots of different things you can do to minimize that risk, but you're never going to get rid of it completely. All the more reason to lean in and figure out what's the best way to minimize it as much as I possibly can. And I think you're right. I think we have to convince people to understand that, if you look back 15, 20 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, reactive was the name of the game for a lot of MSPs. At best, proactive. Now, a lot of the marketing would say that everybody was proactive, but the reality is still very reactive and maybe somewhat proactive. I think the reactive side has to go away, right? I think it has to be more proactive and predictive. And I think the more predictive you can be in an environment like an SMB customer environment, and the MSP that can be more predictive with their systems and utilizing the different technologies we're talking about, minimizing risk in a bunch of different ways, understanding working with someone that understands your vertical really well. I think you can certainly get to that more predictive state, which then allows you to get ahead of some of those challenges that might be there. But if you're living in this reactive state, yeah, you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop every day, and the other shoe will drop every day. Somewhere in your customer base, the shoe will drop every day. And you've got to figure out how to avoid. Nobody loves to live in a reactive state, customers or MSP. Nobody likes that. That's not good for anyone. And so anything you can do to get to that proactive and preventative state is really what's required.
Yeah, no, good point. Just in closing, I'm sure you read like I do the forecasts, right? Gartner's numbers look really optimistic. Canalys has some really good optimistic stuff. All the major MSP platform, enabler technology companies have their own reports. All of them look really solid. I've been tracking the market for longer than I can remember. This seems like a really solid year for MSPs. Again, are we missing something? What's your view of the upcoming year as you look at it?
I would say going into the elections last year, there was a lot of uncertainty in the space. There weren't as many buying signals from prospects and customers. I mean, we all grew really well, but there was definitely some trepidation in the market. I think post the election, that's changed pretty significantly, and we've seen more and more of the whether it's the opening of the purses, it's the opening to the conversation, it's the opening to, what they could possibly do. There's lots of optimism within our customer base as well. And so I felt really good. Now, recently, we've, seen some things happen whether you look at tariffs or what have you, that those things can change on a dime as well. So as long as we can get through this next few months from a political perspective pretty well, I think the optimism is really high. There's a lot to be excited about in the MSP space. The other thing that's great about MSPs is that even when there is uncertainty in the market, and they tend to be very resilient, customers tend to outsource more in those situations and try to figure out how they can do more or stretch their dollar more effectively. And there certainly is much more value to having a 600-person environment that you can bring to bear the right resource at the right time to the right problem for a customer versus the one person that they have in their office that's sort of in charge of IT that only knows so much, has only so much experience, and doesn't have access to the tools and the depth of breadth of resources that an MSP might. And so, yeah, I'm always pretty optimistic about the space. I think every year it's gotten better and better and bigger and bigger. I think the data side of where the MSP is going is also providing more opportunities for us to create um, uh, monthly recurring revenue in a very different way that we've never had before. So I'm really excited and bullish about what's out there.
Yeah. No, I'm glad to hear it. I think many of your peers out there share the same thing. It's always nice to have a level set and a reality check. But Glenn Mathis, president of Integris, really appreciate your time for your viewpoint on these important topics, and I share your optimism for the coming year. I think that MSPs always provide something of if you're providing something of value to your customers, then you will always be in demand and sought after. So I think that's always a good position to be in. But
I appreciate you
really
having me. I
hope
enjoyed our conversation a lot. I always love talking about our space that I love so much, and really excited for where we're going. So thanks for having me, and appreciate your time.
absolutely hope you come back on the program in the near future.
Yeah, invite me
Take
anytime.
care.
Cheers. Bye bye.